house. Our final session this week in Thunder Bay, fourth and final session this evening. Thank you to those as well who've joined us online. We will start with a brief presentation this evening to provide an update on the project. And once that update is done, you'll see a few of my colleagues across the room with the badge similar to the one that I'm wearing right now. And that presents an opportunity to talk about the project, to provide any feedback, to ask questions that you might have as well. Once this session is complete, we're not done with the conversation. This is an ongoing conversation, and our contact information is available, of course. We are available to meet after this event as well, whether that's online or in a community or somewhere else. We're always available to talk about the project and to receive input, feedback, and comments. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Lindsay to start this presentation. So Lindsay, over to you. Yeah.
Hello. So first I'll go through some background on the project. It's a proposed all-season road in Northern Ontario on Treaty 9 land. It will connect the Ring of Fire mineral deposits to the all-season highway network via the proposed Martin Falls Community Access Road. It will provide an opportunity for the Webequie First Nation to also connect to the all-season road network. The Ring of Fire is considered one of the most promising mineral development opportunities in Ontario. And the road project will be subject to both the Provincial Environmental Assessment Act and the Federal Environmental Assessment Act. The proponents of the project are Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation. Both are remote communities that don't currently have all-season road access. There's been numerous historical studies on the road. In 2020, Martin Falls, Webequie, and Ontario agreed to work together, where the communities would conduct a provincial environmental assessment for the road funded by the province. So this map here shows the three proposed road projects in the region. You can see on the north end, there's the Webequie Supply Road in red, Northern Road Link in the middle, and then the Martin Falls Community Access Road in purple on the south end. Each road has its own purpose. The Webequie Supply Road will connect the Webequie Airport to the Ring of Fire, providing economic opportunities through the supply of goods and services to the Ring of Fire. The Martin Falls Community Access Road will connect Martin Falls to the all-season road network, and then Northern Road Link will link the two of them together. This shows the project team. So the projects are being led by the communities on a strategic level. So there's the communities, the chief and council, and the working group. So there's two members from each community on the working group, Lawrence Baxter, Alana Downey Baxter from Martin Falls, and then Roy Spence and Gordon Wabas from Webequie First Nation. And then each community has retained a co-lead for the project to manage the day-to-day operations and the day-to-day work. And that's Michael Fox for Webequie and Qasim Sadiq for Martin Falls. And then they've retained consultants, Atkins, Realis, to do the environmental assessment and engineering design, as well as a number of other subcontractors. So the project is an all-season, multi-use gravel road. It will range from 117 to 164 kilometers in length, depending on the corridor chosen. It'll have a right-of-way of 100 meters wide and numerous watercourse crossing. The largest crossing will be of the Attawapiskat River, and it'll be about 200 meters in length. There's also a lot of temporary and permanent ancillary infrastructure for aggregate sites, access roads, construction camps, maintenance yards, etc. So one of the complicated parts about this project is that the region has a lot of low-lying areas in the peatlands, so it's complex from both an engineering and an environmental perspective. You could risk a lot of negative effects to the peatlands if we're not constructing it properly. It could dam up the flow in the peatlands. So we are looking at other projects that have constructed roads in peatland environments to see what they did and how well that worked. So one of those projects is the East Side Road in Manitoba. So one of the construction measures that was used on the East Side Road and we're looking at is placing geotextile material over the peat and then placing blast rock over the geotextile. So the geotextile will prevent fines from migrating into the peat, and it will also allow, the blast rock will allow for flow beneath the road. So right now we're looking at various alternative corridors to construct the road. These have been divided into segments so that each segment can be assessed independently of the other segments. So right now we have 12 alternative corridor segments. Each corridor is 2 kilometers wide, not 12. And various combinations can be put together to put together a full length of the road. And one thing that is dependent on the Martin Falls Community Access Road is the first segment at the bottom, A1 versus A2, will be decided on depending on where the Martin Falls Road goes. We'll have to link up to it. So this map, it shows a heat map of the terrain in the area. This is how we originally developed the corridor segments. We looked for areas where you could physically build a road that had some higher ground. We also looked at known biological and cultural constraints, but a lot of it, the initial placement of them was based on terrain. So you can see in the map, green is good, green is higher ground, red is water. So there's not a lot of green in the area. A lot of it is along the esker. But yeah, we have a terrain specialist that's been retained to develop these roads and do the terrain mapping, and we put together some plausible routes for it. But now we have to look at these and figure out what the best corridors are. So, we're looking at more than terrain now. We're looking at species at risk, cultural use areas, archaeological sites, et cetera. So we are currently starting the alternatives assessment. And there is a fact sheet on it outlining a lot more information on how we're going to assess the alternatives. And we're definitely interested in feedback on that process. And yeah, next slide. And this shows just the 3 options we have for crossing the Attawapiskat River. This is one of the main drivers of the alternatives, is depending on where we cross, it depends on some of the road segments to have to connect to the crossing. So originally we had an eastern crossing and a western crossing, but the western crossing that we were looking at has some rapids that are potential sturgeon spawning habitat. So we're moving that west crossing a little bit to the east to avoid that potential sturgeon spawning habitat. This graphic here shows the provincial regulatory process. It's divided into a planning phase and an assessment phase. We've successfully made it through the planning phase. We have an approved terms of reference with conditions. And during that process, we received and responded to over 1,000 comments from Indigenous communities, regulators, and other stakeholders on the project. We took those comments and we changed our terms of reference and made additional commitments over and above the terms of reference to try and alleviate some of the concerns that we were hearing. This is the federal process. The federal process also has a planning phase and an assessment phase. So during the planning phase, it was a separate process from the provincial where we had to submit a different set of documents. But now the plan is going forward, we will submit one document, one environmental assessment report that will satisfy both the federal and provincial processes. This next map shows a timeline. So this is a timeline for the environmental assessment and potential decision or approvals if that's what they decide. So you can see it's lengthy. We started baseline studies in 2021. They're still ongoing. We're going to be doing more baseline studies in 2024 and potentially continuing beyond that. So you can see that our plan right now is to submit the environmental assessment report in 2027 and receive our regulatory decisions in 2028. This is subject to change, though. We're always looking at tweaking the schedule as we need to. So an environmental assessment is a process to predict, evaluate, and mitigate potential effects of a project. It supports planning and decision-making. It includes engagement with rights holders and stakeholders to inform the process. So we conduct baseline studies to understand the environment. We design our project and develop a project description, and then we look how the two interact, how the environment and the project interact, and what potential adverse effects the project could have on the environment. Then we look for ways to mitigate those effects. We also do an assessment of residual effects, which are effects remaining after mitigation. And we look at a cumulative effects assessment, so how the project could interact with other reasonably foreseeable projects or existing projects in the region. After that, we propose more mitigation measures. We make a series of commitments, as well as develop monitoring and adaptive management plans. So we also have an in-depth consultation and engagement program. It includes 22 communities. The proponent has a memorandum of understanding with the province, where the province has delegated some aspects of consultation to the proponent. All consultation is documented in a record of consultation using software called Praxis. And we are required to submit regular consultation progress reports to the regulator. So the purpose of consultation is really to promote two-way communication. While we do have a lot of information to present, we really do want to receive a lot of information too. We really want to understand how people are impacted by this project and identify ways to mitigate and address those concerns. So consultation, is aimed to be meaningful, transparent, inclusive and accessible, flexible and collaborative. Martin Falls and Webequie are committed to carrying out a thorough and meaningful consultation and engagement process for the project in a respectful manner that reflects Indigenous culture and traditions. And on the left, we just listed some of the ways that we're currently consulting, such as open houses like this, but also community meetings, workshops. We've got a website, Facebook page, Instagram page, X page, and a number of other ways. And I am now going to hand it over to Ange Brooks to give you the second half of the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, so another big component of the project is our Indigenous participation program. It covers a number of different things. One of them being that is Indigenous employment. So we encourage community members to come out with us in any and all of our field programs. We've hired a number of Indigenous subcontractors, including Thay Media and Origin. Thay Media is here. They do handle all of our live streams and radio shows, that kind of thing. Origin created a number of virtual reality experiences, and I know they were up in Webequie and Martin Falls demonstrating these to community members, and basically showed things like day in the life of a biologist or day in the life of a construction worker, those types of things. We also used a bunch of local Indigenous communities. One company we hired built our Wolverine run poles. You maybe didn't notice in the previous slide, but there's a Wolverine sitting on a stand. That thing on the top right. So we had a local company build those for us. Next slide, thanks. IK is another really big component of this project. We are looking for all communities to participate in the Indigenous Knowledge Program so that we can have the opportunity to use the data from the community members and incorporate it into the environmental assessment. It's probably more important than any of the data we're collecting through our, Western scientific methods, because who knows better than what's going on in the land and how they use the land than the people who live there. So we're looking to gather that information to make the environmental assessment document more fulsome. So valued components is a really technical term. It's basically aspects of the environment that have been identified as important or sensitive. They're of concern and value from a cultural heritage perspective. And these things are likely to interact with the project. And these things fall under 6 main umbrella headings. We've got Aboriginal treaty rights and interests, biological environment, socioeconomic, human health, physical environment, and cultural heritage resources. So this slide, I just want to put your attention to this graphic because I think it's really well done. It shows how IK is incorporated into the environmental assessment. So it shows it there on the top left as a little seed that starts being added into the project at the very beginning. And you can see the seed continuing along at very specific times, milestones in the project. And at the very end, you see it in the roots of the tree and how that tree is growing and getting bigger. And that's just a representation of how important it is for us to have the Indigenous knowledge that we can add into the EA to make it so much better. So these next few slides are just a little bit more detail about the valued components. This one is the physical environment. It includes things like air and noise study, groundwater, surface water, climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. The biological environment covers off a lot of things. Fish, wildlife, birds, species at risk, plants. There's so much here I could talk about forever about this, but let's go to the next slide. So this next slide gives you a little bit of detail about our caribou collaring studies. We started these, I believe, in the winter of 2021, or maybe the winter of, I can't remember, 2021 or 2022. We hired a specialist subcontractor, and they helped us with capturing the caribou using a net gun. And once the caribou were captured, we took hair samples, blood samples. We did an overall health assessment of the caribou, and then we fitted each one with a collar. We only captured female caribou because that's important. And the reason why we took the blood samples is to check and see if the caribou were pregnant, because follow-up surveys to the caribou collaring program are called calf recruitment surveys. So we need to know which caribou were pregnant so that we can follow them along in subsequent years and see how their calves are doing. We've had some concerns voiced over the caribou collars themselves and if they're heavy or, the caribou don't like them. But I can just tell you from myself handling the collars, it's really no different than a dog wearing a collar. They're quite light. And after 3 years, they automatically pop off. So it's not a long-term thing that the caribou wear. And the collar doesn't interfere with their, daily activities. One thing that's interesting with the collars, it has a GPS sensor on it, and we can track them almost in real time where any given caribou is at any time of the day. So we have all of that information. Under socioeconomic studies, we've got primary data collection. Most of this data will be collected through community surveys, which should be starting fairly soon, including focus groups, in-depth interviews, and as well as using publicly available data. The cultural heritage studies, this is where archaeology and cultural heritage studies falls under. Human health, we also collect this through primary data collection. We're interested in how the community uses country foods, their hunting practices, their trapping, if they do berry collecting or medicinal plants, that type of thing. So what we've heard through some of the comments that we've already received are, these ones are specific to consultation engagement. There's people concerned that we are having appropriate consultation and engagement throughout the process, that we incorporate Indigenous knowledge into the EA, which we're trying to do by asking the communities for this information, as well as minimizing impacts to Aboriginal and treaty rights. Another key concern that's come up is cumulative effects. Lindsay talked about it a little bit, how we get to that stage. We're required to do a cumulative effects assessment. And some of the concerns that people have told us about are how this road will trigger industrial development in the Ring of Fire, and as well as effects from the other roads going on within the general geographic area. We've also heard a lot of concerns about the environment. One of the big ones is construction on the esker, because we've heard that it's important caribou habitat as well as a moose travel corridor. Also, just in general, building within the James Bay lowlands, we know how sensitive the habitat is and that the communities consider it the breathing lands. So we are cognizant of that. And then we've also heard concerns about the various watercourse crossings, especially the Attawapiskat River, because people are voicing their concerns about possible sedimentation during construction. And another big one we heard is access issues. Once a road is built, how is access by other people from the south coming up into the territories of the Indigenous communities? So once the EA has been completed, that's not the end of the story. We have commitments and monitoring that we have to adhere to. Many of the commitments will relate to various aspects of the project, including construction, operation and maintenance, mitigation measures, consultation engagement, and compliance monitoring. So with regards to monitoring, there will be a lot of follow-up monitoring throughout the entire process. It's not just once a road gets built, everybody walks away. There'll be years and years of monitoring required on various of these valued components. Some of them will probably go beyond 10 years of monitoring post-construction. And I think that's our last slide. This is just the contact us slide. If you need to get in touch with us, we're available Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as the email address, the phone number's up there, and you can come and talk to any of us tonight. You have a question? I don't believe it's going to be a toll road. Sorry? Yeah, it's going to be built for heavy equipment. Yeah. Pardon me? Yes, absolutely. To be determined, but I don't think so. We're still not sure. That's a good question. We still don't know who overall will be the owner of the road in the end. Yeah, I don't know, because this is a big issue, because then who's responsible for maintenance? So, good question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ange. Thank you, Lindsay. So just wanted to thank everyone for coming. We are going to be around till 8 o'clock. So we still have 45 minutes to go for conversation, for questions, comments, feedback. And I want to thank everyone for joining us online as well. And if you haven't had a chance to spend more time, or you're looking for more opportunities, please feel free to get in touch with us, whether through the website or our contact information that was just shared. Thank you.